Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. So today I have for y'all good old Capri's Horn. So of course, as per usual, we're gonna go through the subclass stuff first, then weapons, then armor. For weapons and armor, I'm just gonna go through this tab. This build does not benefit from the Tablet of Ruin in any way, shape, or form. I do not even have this on, but I would actually recommend you switch to this. Um, so if you want to build into this somewhat with the artifact, I'm gonna talk about transferable options in a second, but I would suggest that you keep heavy ordnance on. I would suggest sacrificing one of these or one of the arc ones and changing to Legend Incarnate because we're using two weapons that come from Vault of Glass. I would also recommend using Dreadful Finisher. Now on to subclass stuff. Here we are using Hammer of Saul. Burning Ball just sucks without Pyrogales, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I definitely prefer Hammer of Saul. Barricade, Rattling Barricade, do not use Towering Barricade. Use Rally Barricade. As you can see, the cooldown is drastically lower. That's the important aspect of this. We're using Bonk Hammer, but honestly, you can use Hammer Strike. Bonk is just a quick, easy way of healing. I'm using Storm Grenade. Do not use Healing Grenade. If you are a Warlock or a Titan, you have no reason to ever use a Healing Grenade. Titans, if you're struggling with healing, use Sol Invictus and Bonk. That's all you should need. I have never ever had to use a healing grenade on Solar Titan, not even for Master Crota. I never have had to use it. Same with Master King's Fall. Like anytime I've used Solar in super high end content like Day 1 raids or Master, I've never had to use healing grenade. You shouldn't really have to. I didn't even have to use it in Pantheon either. Um, Because, yeah, I think at the time, Power Gales was extremely strong. But I use Swarm Grenade. I will say I would not really recommend using Fusion Grenade either because it has a high chance of killing. You do not want to use a grenade that necessarily kills. Don't use Fire Sprite. Fire Sprite just sucks. I think they should inherently give this thing a second grenade charge. But Thermite is pretty decent. I'm using Swarm, Incendiary is also fine. Solar Grenade's also fine. The key part is you don't want an ignition from your grenade unless you're throwing it at a beefier target. Uh, then we are using Roaring Flames and Sol Invictus. Capri's Horn actually does have somewhat of an interaction with Roaring Flames specifically. And of course we're using Sol Invictus. These are the two best aspects. Two best aspects. In the almost, I would argue, at least for at least some of the best aspects on Titan, I would say Sol Invictus is probably the best, but fragments, we're using Ember of Wonder here for the plus 10 resilience, no other reason. Ember of Mercy, we are not using this fragment for the first part. When you revive an ally, you and other nearby allies can gain restoration. We are using this for the second part. Picking up a Fire Sprite grants restoration, and also the plus 10 resilience. That's the big reason why we're doing this. And this one, defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a Fire Sprite. The melee energy part isn't important. By the way, Fire Sprites do give you grenade energy, but that's why I'm saying you can use Hammer Strike instead. I just like using Bonk because of Bonk. Um, However, just to kind of prove a point, I will use Hammer Strike for now. That's also going to help a little bit of movement since they changed this to where it doesn't consume your full melee charge. At one point in time, it did used to. Um, so that's kind of nice. So yeah, y'all will kind of see. We're gonna be using this build in the Nether. I'm not gonna pick up any buffs or anything like that. I'm not gonna be picking any of those up. But getting abilities is quite easy to do. But so yeah, we're doing that. Then the last one we are using is Ember of Ashes, so that we get in more of an ignition from like throwing our abilities at beefier targets. So that's why we're using Ember of Ashes. I will say you do have two other options. If you are struggling to hit your Hammer of Saw, which you realistically shouldn't be, Ember of Beams is a solid option. It gives you extra intellect, which is useless. But I will say the other one is Ember of Char. Your solar ignition spreads scorch to affected targets, which can put you at, you can have like a one fragment like that boosts everything. So I'll say Ember of Char is a really solid option if you don't want to use Ember of Ashes either. I'll say Ember of Char is definitely better if you were ad clearing, but if you were mixing this in with doing damage, I would say Ember of Ashes is probably better. Okay, so now that we've talked about the subclass a little bit, let's go ahead and talk about the other aspects of the build here. We'll go armor first. Do keep in mind your resilience recovery should be at tier 9s, and discipline I would recommend having at tier 9. I will say you could definitely have strength a little bit higher if you so choose. So that is another thing is I prefer throwing my grenade more often over just I use hammer strike, shoulder charge, mostly for the movement itself, not necessarily to hit enemies with per se. But I am using special ammo finder, heavy ammo finder. This is for if you are solo. If you're with a team, I would recommend you have, and especially if you don't have the energy for both of these, have on special ammo scout, because you're gonna need special ammo with this build, with with a specific weapon. However, if you are not using the rocket sidearm I am using, then go ahead and use heavy ammo finder with heavy ammo scout. Scout. Now, momentum transfer and impact reduction, Ollie, these are standard on every single build. Standard on every single build. At least for Titan. For Warlocks and Hunters, sometimes I do a little bit different. Harmonic must stay on every build. This is honestly, if you're a Titan, this is what I recommend. For Warlocks, I would say concussive dampeners are actually going to be a little bit better. Because a lot of the times, if you're a Warlock, right, yeah, if you're a Warlock, this is because enemies like throw a lot of like AoE grenades. They can throw them in your rift, so you would have to leave the rift. Concussive damper I would recommend as a Warlock. If we're Hunters, concussive or melee, but probably concussive. I'll say Sniper's also pretty decent. Hunter kind of depends on the build. Now for legs, one surge. Generally speaking, unless you are in a top tier rate DPS setting, I have never ran more than two surges honestly, because recuperation helps me stay alive. And having recuperation, you just can't have recuperation along with three solar surges. And this is coming from someone that does top DPS in just about every single, like, I have yet to realistically be beaten. I have yet to be beaten on a consistent basis for any raid DPS situation. I have yet, the closest that it's came to was on Crota. I was doing Oversoul for with Tractor, and I was double fusion, and I was still out DPSing some people because I was using Power Gales. This was back when Power Gales was super OP, but I was DPSing people that were using like triple Lucent Blade and like all that kind of stuff. So DPSing is not necessarily just the buffs you have, but it's how you use your weapons. So yeah, you realistically don't need more than one surge in terms of general gameplay. But this is realistically what I always have is recuperation, one surge, and then either absolution. But if you do not have enough energy for absolution, there is another one. If you're using an all-encompassing build, I recommend Orb of Restoration. However, if you're using more grenade melees, then I would suggest these two. Because our build is all-purpose, absolution is going to be a little bit better. For Arc Titan, usually I would use the grenade-based one. And for our Mark, on other builds, if you're not using your barricade as much, double up on time dilation, unless you're using thruster on arc. But we are using powerful attraction here because we are spamming our barricade. Now, weapons. Weapons are pretty important here. I'll let you go back here and say weapons. By the way, this build cannot handle anything other than unstop. Titans don't have a super reliable way of getting radiant. That really belongs to Warlocks and Hunters. But Titans have a reliable way of igniting, so ignition here. This is the only one we're able to do. Obviously, you can change stuff around to, whatnot. Um, most of the loot we have is completely free to play. Artemis Armor you cannot obtain free to play because the only free to play dungeon is Prophecy, and Prophecy doesn't have Artifice. So that's one thing you can't get. Beetle, Khepri's Horn is completely free to play. Fatebringer, it has adventures come from Vault of Glass. I've crafted them. Also, let me change that. Go to Little Sparrow. By the way, I forgot fashion. If y'all want to see, I'm using Whispered Sheen as my shader, but I actually kind of like this fashion. The Khepri's Horn helmet, this ornament shades extremely weirdly, so that's something of note. By the way, fun fact about Khepri's Horn, it does glow when you have your barricade charged. At least the horn aspects do. So that's kind of a nice little detail. Now, we're using Fatebringer with Kinetic Tremors, Frenzy. Do keep in mind, Kinetic Tremors and Explode Payload are in the exact same slot. Otherwise, I would do Kinetic and Explode Payload. Frenzy is really solid. I will say, if you're more comfortable with hitting your precision shots, I would recommend Kinetic Tremors Precision Instrument. And I'm using Special Ammo Finder here. This is for beefier targets. This is what I'm using for beefier targets here, and in case can't become anti-champ at some point in the future. This is really solid. Another option is Bastion here. If you're using Bastion, I would suggest Bonk. Bastion cooks. I'm going to be perfectly honest, Bastion is extremely broken, and if you have not used it, I would suggest using it. It's pretty insane, especially with like particle deconstruction and everything. Particle doesn't work how it used to. It doesn't like apply weaken or anything like that, but it gives diffusion or linear the specific damage bonus. So there's that. Um, Now Aberrant Action is where we're going to talk about alternative options for free to play and non free to play. But for Aberrant Action, I'm using Heal Clip Incandescent. Heal Clip is really solid, extremely solid. Incandescent. I like Rocket Sidearms. The one issue I do have with using this is the fact that perks that are based on reload kind of struggle. Like the Rocket Sidearm itself has to have some way to get a decent amount of ammo, which is why I would prefer if you have this on, I would suggest you have um Special Ammo Finder over Heavy because you need more than a magazine in order to make the heal clip work. This goes for Volt Shot as well, which is why Indebted Kindness really doesn't enhance perks, specifically enhance lead from gold. I will say there is one perk that I would not mind over Volt Shot on arc weapons, and that is Chain Reaction. Due to enhanced chain reaction increases ammo reserves. This is also why doubling up on reserves is really important for this specifically. And here I do have reload speed here, a little bit of extra reload speed. The handling part I don't care about, but the reload speed is kind of important here. I will say, you can unfortunately you can't have special ammo finder, but you could opt for heavy ammo finder enhancement as well. So there's that whole shebang. Now, for replacements for this, there are two recommendations I have for you. One is free to play, one is non-free to play. Now, so for free to play players, you actually have two different options here. However, do not use Fatebringer if you are using this. I would recommend using Bastion or using Ice. I would realistically recommend you can use a sniper here, if I'm being perfectly honest. But I would suggest a shotgun or a fusion here in this spot, in that kinetic slot. Now, the two options I recommend are Heliocentric, which does have Healclip Incandescent. It is a world drop. That is your first free-to-play option. However, I'm not a particular fantastic fan of fusion rifles, of sidearms like that. So it is a lightweight frame too. Your other option, I don't know if I even have it on this character. Even if I can find a version, that'd be fantastic. Alright, so your other option here is actually going to be Luna's Howl. Luna's Howl is a hand cannon that drops from Onslaught. That's like in the playlist deal. I recommend focusing it, but that can drop with Heal Clip Incandescent. I will say you'll want to look at your barrel and magazine perks specifically because the reload speed on that hand cannon is quite slow. So you'll want to try to speed that up as much as possible. Those are your two free-to-play options. Now, the one free-to-play option that is actually quite good is a trace rifle. Now, for trace rifles, heal clip, you don't necessarily need or want, because trace rifles you just want to beat. If you have Acacia's Dejection, I have Reconstruction Incandescent on it. This is a really solid roll, especially for this season. I would say outside of the season, I would not really recommend this. But, okay, a lot of people are hopping on, I guess. But, this is a pretty good trace rifle. It comes from Root of Nightmares. So that is something of note. I will say, outside of the season, I can't really recommend it. But Reconstruction Incandescent is just flat out probably the best perk combination on here. You can go Rewind rounds as well. I will say the Origin trait doesn't really matter per se. And if you decide to use Acacia's Dejection, you can build into these. So you can build into these bottom row columns. And now for the final weapon is a requirement for this build, Hezen Vengeance. By the way, I do not recommend using any solar exotics with this, except for maybe Gallowhorn. but I don't really recommend it because Hesitant Vengeance we have here. The reason being is a lot of solar exotics don't build into the solar subclass stuff that well. That's why, generally speaking, I don't really use solar exotics. At least in the energy slot. Arc has better ones. Same with Void is kind of a weird situation. But Heads of Vengeance here, we have Cluster Bomb, Bait and Switch. This is a dual-purpose rocket launcher here. By the way, it is extremely good here. We have both Enhanced, in case you want to know what these do. Enhanced Cluster Bomb increase the blast radius. Bait and Switch, we'll get to Enhanced Bait and Switch in a second. But Time Lost Magazine, all Vault of Glass weapons have. Final blows with this weapon grant bonus super energy when your super energy expires. This weapon's magazine is doubled for a long duration and reloads from reserves. By the way, a little bit of a side note. There are two other options. Another free-to-play option would be the Vision Confluence Scout Rifle. Yeah, Vision of Confluence. I don't have, obviously, a good roll of this. I'm kind of waiting to get a Deep Sight Harmonizer for this, but the Vision of Confluence is a really, really solid option. Another option, if you're not free to play, is Trustee from Deepstone Crypt. Really, really good. I believe it gets Demolitionist, Incandescent. I think that's the role I have on it. But don't quote me on that. You want Incandescent at the very least, and preferably Demolitionist or whatever. I'll say Vision of Confluence here cannot get Heal Clip and Incandescent in the same perk slot. So do keep that in mind. You have to go either Heal Clip Expo Payload or like Incandescent Expo Payload, like something like that. So that kind of sucks for that. I would recommend Trustee over Vision of Confluence. In case y'all would like to see my Trustee, I should have it in here. Right here. I love it Reconstruction. Incandescent. It doesn't have Hero Clip, so I was like, fuck it. I don't want to reload. Okay, back to Hesitant Vengeance, though. This build does have some unique interactions. So, as y'all know on this channel, I usually express builds that have unique interactions, unless it's kind of meta. The unique interaction here is Time Lost Magazine and Enhanced Bait and Switch last for about the same amount of time. So when your super ends, there's also why I would recommend using Hesitant Vengeance. If you're using this for DPS, I recommend using it with Pyrogales, because Pyrogales is a quicker one-off than Hammer of Sol is. But when your super ends, you're actually going to be loading in 2 rockets at a time. I believe with how we're using it, I believe we hold 8 rockets. So you reload 2 rockets while Bait and Switch is still procced, which is kind of insane. So you would super, bam, proc Bait and Switch, double rocket, reload, double rocket, reload, double rocket, reload, double rocket, reload. You're not going to be able to see the DPS right here because the Nether we're too strong for the Nether. But that is kind of how this lovely build works. Okay, keep in mind here, I'm not going to pick up any buffs here. We're strictly going to use this build. This build is kind of interesting in a lot of ways. So another little bit of a limited tidbit I did not mention earlier was Caprice Warren actually does contribute to Sunbreaker. Okay, by the way, I haven't finished this week's story yet. I do plan on finishing it. I haven't finished it yet on my Warlock because I think I might want to do the story all in one go for on my Warlock. Also, please don't be like me. I took a thumbnail thing quite earlier. Interesting. So just so y'all can kind of see here, you can mind you do have to be a little close. Roaring Flames times 3. 1 barricade gave us Roaring Flames times 3. These are wizards. Beautiful. There's that all done and dusted. See, our Bait and Switch does last quite a long time. So yeah, bait and switch lasts, I think it's 8 seconds enhanced. I think that's what I believe it is. Don't correct me if I'm wrong, though. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Got our 4 lovely fires right there. This one I don't think I've done. And also, you don't exactly have to hit target directly with Rocket Siren, which is kind of nice. Let's go ahead and use our barricade here. Do keep in mind it doesn't actually go that far. Like the Khepri's Horn wave doesn't go super far. It goes about this far. It doesn't go terribly far. Also, by the way, our barricade's already back, which is kind of crazy. Our grenade's back. And of course, we can stay in our sunspot to get a little bit of healing. By the way, if enemies do happen to cross your barricade, they will become blinded. There's Tolan, but we're not really going to interact with them. Okay, we have 2 rockets. We don't have our super, so I can't show that aspect. But as you can see, we also have 18 rounds in this thing. So and just with pure hand cannon. Okay, we do have our super back, which is nice. I blew myself up. That's also another danger here. Rocket Tyranids can blow you up at close range, so just keep that in mind. Same with rockets. We don't really necessarily want to use our super here, so I'm just going to do this. Go ahead and load here. As you can see, they're taking damage from all our goodies. I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to save it. I'm not going to wait around now. Okay, we're just going to do this. Main switch is still up. It is not safe to use it in that range, though, but usually you'd be able to fire 2 rockets there. But yeah, there's kind of that. There is the lovely build for you. I don't recommend using the Khepri's Horn in a raid situation, unless it's like an ad clear type deal, but in dungeons, this could be absolutely fantastic, because what you could do is before DPS starts, use your hammers, you know, to do a little bit of ad clearing, to proc that has Vengeance, you know, and then you can just go bam, bam, bam. Or if you want to use Power Gales, you can definitely substitute. If you do substitute Power Gales for Khepri's Horn, I do recommend you not build into using your barricade as much. For instance, I would honestly recommend using Bonk Hammer over Khepri's, because Khepri's you're spawning a lot of sunspots, but with Power Gales you're not necessarily doing that. I definitely do not recommend you using Consecration in any realistic way, shape, or form. But if you're running 9-foot like strikes and GMs, this could be pretty solid. I would recommend obviously switching up the kinetic and the energy weapon, depending on what champions you're dealing with. But honestly, this is a really, really good build, especially if you're running like solo campaign stuff or that sort of deal. I really do think this build is quite fun. I just don't think I don't think it's realistic for like raids or six-man activities for the most part, because the abilities feed into each other with this build. And so, on that note, though, thanks for tuning in. This upcoming Monday, March 24th, I will be streaming Bloodborne until I beat every single boss, outside of challenge sessions, of course. Every time I die, I will have to drink unflavored sparkling water. I hate sparkling water as a whole. I do not like LaCroix or La Croix or any of that stuff. But I'll be drinking specifically unflavored because I hate that the most. Uh, Also, y'all will be seeing my face. I will have a little bit of some special surprises on that camera. So, uh, pull up to the stream. It will be at I will be starting at 1 p.m. Eastern time. That is when I will be starting the stream. I do not expect it to end until like maybe at the soonest 11 p.m. Um, because there's no way I'm gonna be able to beat all these bosses that quickly. I will say deaths. I'm only going to count if they are outside of challenge dungeons. And also, as far as the Come Dungeon goes, I will be using it for blood vials and quicksilver bullets only. I am not allowed to use it for any other reason. Not for Molotov cocktails, not for papers, not for leveling up, none of that. I am only allowed to use it for blood vials and quicksilver bullets because I don't want to farm for those items. So just keep that in mind. Cheeses are allowed. So the Gascoigne Stair cheese, the Shadows of Yharnam cheese, all that stuff is allowed. However, if I die during the cheese, I still have it still counts as a death. So that's that on Monday. Do expect the next Dark Souls part to come in later next week. It'll be Lothar Castle with a little bit of the Ring City DLC, and then I will be putting Torchic through the Gauntlet for the final episode. Do expect a first Berserker Kazan review as far as is it platinum worthy. Expect that next month, because I will be participating and playing with it or whatever, right? Two non-Souls related videos that are upcoming are going to be one, I will be releasing an Arc Titan build that is not Storm's Keep. Because I think Storm's Keep currently is overhyped for using it outside of raids. Because let me tell you, I was using a sort of particular, just pure weapon setup on Hunter without rolling Storm and just using a few fragments as I was getting bolt charges so fast that I was not really able to deposit them effectively. But also, I will be uploading only one First Ascendant video. Do not expect for it to become like super like content thing. It's gonna be my thoughts on First Ascendant, the characters I like to play, what I recommend for newer players going into First Ascendant, general thoughts and whatnot. Kind of like a good old review now that the game has been out for some time. I have about almost 350 hours in the game. Which is honestly feels like a quite normal amount. And there's going to be a message to newer players and a message to players that have way too much time in the game and my advice for them. On that note, though, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I will be seeing y'all this upcoming Monday for Bloodborne's 10-year anniversary, because nothing is going to get announced, and as long as my hopes and dreams are rock bottom, they cannot be destroyed. On that note, catch y'all on the flip side.